Back from vacation, we are back into the saddle here on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I'm Dan Vespers. Thanks as always for tuning in, everyone. And today we explore whatever that team is that I forgot to scroll up on the window. Oh, there they are. It's the Atlanta Hawks. We move into the Eastern Conference today. I think we did finally officially get through the full Western Conference in our last show back at the end of last week. I was out of town for a few days. Luckily, the power of the Old Man Squad Network brought you some amazing goodies from Noah Rubin while I was out of town. It makes it a lot easier for me to disappear for a couple of days when there are other folks that are doing outstanding content as well. Please take a moment, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. That's how we continue to add more stuff and grow and all that good whatevers. And today, we're going to be talking about, the Hawks, and there are a lot of pieces that didn't likely change a great deal over the last calendar year. But there are also likely pieces that looked like they were about to turn into something very special and then maybe didn't so much. The Hawks last year finished at 40-42. They've been mired in the mid-pack for quite some time now, and every once in a while they show flashes of being real-life relevant. But Vegas thinks they're doing much better this offseason. The Kristaps Porzingis trade being the big move, but the Hawks' season win total number over at our buddies at FanDuel Sportsbook is 46.5, which is not to say a massive number, but it's hard to get up and over that kind of next hurdle. Just for the record, if we're looking at this most recent season, 24-25, the teams in the Eastern Conference that had more than 46.5 wins were the Cavs, Celtics, Knicks, Pacers, and Bucks. That's it. As we just mentioned, the Hawks were at 40. The Magic had 41. Pistons had that big leap forward. They made it all the way to 44. Do we think the Hawks can add 7 wins this offseason, when we also consider the fact that they did win their last 3 games last year? So they were 37-42 and hard charged the final week when, everybody else had given up and they were still trying. The Hawks do appear to be a team trying to win. So at least there's that. Like, you don't have to take wins off the board assuming that they're going to be out of contention and then out of competition towards the end of the year. They're going to be trying to win. But again, looking at that number over on FanDuel at 46.5, that is a big one. And it's getting a lot of action on the under at minus 132 is the VIG. Like, you paid $32 to get that wager in there. The over 46.5 is even money right now. It's fun, by the way, to be able to talk about FanDuel as a partner here on the podcast. It really feels like we've leveled up a little bit. Shout out to the Believe Network for getting all that put together as well. I have 6 players I want to talk about on today's show. We'll just jump right into Trae Young because he's the most obvious one. Even if he was not the top 9 category player on the Hawks this past year, he was number 51 in 9 category leagues this season, which is not even remotely close to the top player. However, in 8-cat, he was number 16 in 8 category leagues. Big gap there, of course, being the 4.7 ungodly turnovers per ball game. That is so many. 24 points, 11.5 assists, 1.2 steals is actually pretty good. 3 threes, bad field goal percent at 41. We had that 1 year for Trae where he shot 46%, and we all looked at him and went, what happened here? And now he's gone back to being what he was before, which is somewhere between 41 and 43 for the most part. 43.5 was kind of where he was maxing out. He's not a brilliant three-point shooter. Some of that has to do with just the sheer volume of threes he takes, but he's actually a career 35%er from downtown. Big-time assist to your team. Choose my words more carefully, I guess. In assists and free throw percent, those are his 2 biggest positive impact categories. And the big surprise from this last year was that his scoring actually came down from 25.7 down to 24.2, despite the minutes staying almost exactly constant. The assists, the turnovers, those both went up, which, again, like no DeJounte Murray anymore, so it kind of made sense. But it also felt like with DeJounte Murray gone and the additions mostly being, like Zachary Reese-Shea, who they drafted, and some players that were there but are no longer there after this. Karis LeVert, looking at you. It was very interesting to see Trae Young's field goal attempts per game actually come down. Some of that was related to other players that we're going to talk about in a minute on today's show, but it did feel like this past year, and maybe it was because the shots just weren't dropping for Trae, he focused extraordinarily hard on assists. I mean, almost 12 assists per ball game was a bonkers level high number in that category. There was really nobody close. Jokic was at 10.2. That was the number 2 guy there. Now, admittedly, like anybody that's getting you 9 assists or more is hyper elite in that category. Even 8, frankly, is a pretty big chunk. But that giant assist number is pretty much the reason that Trae Young was a top 50 play in 9-cat and a second rounder in 8-cat. Because the other stuff that he did well, free throw percent was very good, but not what you'd call like overwhelmingly hyper elite, was another one of those discussion points of like, how much does a specialist type player really mean? It's probably not fair to call Trae Young a specialist because, 24 points per game is also good. 3 threes is good. 1.2 steals is fine. The free throw percent is also good. But much like his teammate, Dyson Daniels, a lot of the value for Trae Young was tied up in one statistical category. Dyson's value in steals was greater, far greater than Trae Young's value in assists. Just when you compare them to sort of the average player, you're just looking at like what is this in relation to everybody else? But it's frankly, like from a discussion standpoint, it's not that different. And the fact that he was so far out ahead, like Wemby in blocks is kind of a similar thing to Dyson Daniels. It does take a little bit of the sting out of the good sting, I guess. It takes a little bit of the fastball off. Like, why am I drafting this guy? So the answer to that question is you're drafting Trae Young because he's a build type player. He is so very good in a few of what you'd call the guard stats that he fits a lot of head-to-head mold basketball teams. If you draft Trae Young, I still don't think that he belonged in the first round as a draft play, but he's going to go there because a lot of teams that draft him super early are also teams that are going to punt both field goal and turnover. And if you did both of those, he was number 6. So obviously that's a hefty jump, wiping out 2 big negative categories. But you know me, I don't really like to double punt right out of the chute. I understand why if you have like if you're picking on the turn 12th or something like that, you might not give yourself much of a choice but to double punt. And so that's why that kind of makes sense. But at the same time, like he's a build guy. And in Roto, he makes absolutely 0 sense at that part of the draft. Head to head, you can see the argument. Like I just laid it out there why he should go that early. But you do sort of lock yourself into a specific team structure if you're taking a guy who, if you're only punting one of those 2 categories, I guess, well, let's just do a little quick math here using our friends over at Basketball Monster. If you're only punting field goal percent, Trae Young goes up to number 18. If you're only punting turnovers, he goes up to number 16. So either way, he jumps from a 5th rounder to a 2nd rounder. And then again, if you double punt, he jumps to a 1st. So yeah, like you could make the argument for a single punt Trae Young at the end of the 1st round is not that far off as a mid-2nd rounder. You cannot draft him at the 1st round if you're not planning on punting one of those 2 categories. Like it's basically a team-ending type of decision. Pretty hard. Not impossible, but pretty damn hard to come back from. And that's the Trae Young argument. And it's never going to change. If his field goal percent manages to come back a little bit this year, he'll get closer in 9-cat to being that top-level guy that he gets drafted in. But he's a guy that's going to go early because most fantasy players play head-to-head, and most fantasy players are punting when they do something along those lines. Let's go now to Adam King's adult son, Dyson Daniels. This, of course, is a joke. I don't know if I need to say that. I don't know what the rules are for YouTubers. Dyson Daniels coming off an amazing fantasy season. He was number 14 in 9 category leagues this last year. 14 points, 6 boards, 4.5 assists, 3 steals per game. Also got your 0.7 blocks, as if the steals weren't good enough. Over a three-pointer, just barely. 49% from the field, which was a really nice sort of extra feather in the cap. A wretched 59% at the free throw line, but he didn't take that many. However, it is worth pointing out if you were punting free throws, he was a mid-first rounder. Still, and I've had this conversation before, the issue with Dyson Daniels being ranked as a second rounder this past year is that his value was so heavily tied up in one category. And obviously, if you're drafting Dyson Daniels, you're not punting steals, but without his steals category, he was number 140. The rest of his fantasy numbers make him a not consistently startable fantasy player. So like if Dyson Daniels was only at, call it, 1.1 or 1 steal per game, I guess, instead of 3, he drops outside the top 100. Not that 14, 6, and 4 isn't bad, but like the field goal percent was meh. It was good for a guard, but it was meh overall. He's not helping you there. Bad free throw number, not many 3-pointers. He was mostly sub-average in the other fantasy categories, or like right around average. The reason I bring that up is you might get into a place, and this is kind of what happened this past year, where guys being drafted outside the top 100 happened to be good at steals. Like if you look at the list of players that were drafted from 95 to the end of fantasy drafts, I would argue that the most prevalent category among them, or certainly it felt this way. This is not, I didn't do the deep dive on that, but it sure felt like steals were pretty readily available in that group. It's not going to be the same every year. But what if, let's just create this hypothetical. What if you spent a second round pick on Dyson Daniels this coming year, which you should not, by the way, and then your turn came back around in the 8th, 9th, 10th rounds, and there were these 3-and-D guys that you've been eyeballing for a while. I forget who we've talked about on this show already as guys that probably make sense to draft in that range that are good at that stuff. Suddenly, you spent your second round pick locking in a steals category that you ended up sort of double locking in later on. And now you didn't really need Dyson Daniels steals, and you blew a second rounder on him when you could have. And this year, again, is going to be a little bit different because 3 or 4 of the top 20 guys are out for most of the season with, catastrophic leg injuries. But in most cases, like mid-second rounders, if that's where you think he's going to go, talking about Dyson Daniels here, like that's a spot that you could have gotten Devin Booker in the past. You could have gotten Domantas Sabonis in the past. These guys that help you in 3, 4 categories instead of basically 1. So as much as I love Dyson Daniels, I think what we kind of have to sit on is this idea of this past year was the year to draft Dyson Daniels. And we did. Great. Like, take the win, but don't chase it. Don't chase him up the board. There are some guys that I think you could chase up the board. We talked about Ivica Zubac. I think someone who probably won't get drafted as high as he potentially could have, although Brook Lopez is there, so maybe that's not the best example anymore. Like sometimes there are guys that have a good season, and then they're going to have another good one, and you're like, they're still not going early enough. I don't know where Dyson Daniels is going to go. I think fantasy players, by and large, are smart enough not to spend a second-round pick on a guy who was a fantasy plus in 1 out of the 9 categories, basically. But I also don't know that for sure. Like, he finished at number 14, so why wouldn't the first batch of pre-ranks have him somewhere in that neck of the woods? I would strongly recommend not drafting him in the second round. He doesn't give you enough in a bunch of different categories to make it there. And so just accept the fact that we got a great win this past season, and that's just what it's got to be. Next player on the list is Jalen Johnson, who was well on his way to a brilliant fantasy season and then had it derailed by injury. He played just 36 ball games this last year, but averaged 19, 10, and 5 That's insane. 1.2 threes, 1.6 steals, a block, 50% from the field, slight negative in free throw at about 75% of the foul line, and turnovers were not great. This is also a guy, believe it or not, if you go back and you sort of do a little bit of extra digging, the first, what do we want to call it? The first, like, month-ish? I mean, he only lasted for, like, 2 and change months. So it was like the first 3 weeks, give or take, he was in the top 50 range because his turnovers were almost 3.5 and his free throw was down around 70 instead of 75. And then after that fact, the free throws started going down, the turnovers tapered off a little bit, and then Jalen Johnson was number 8 once he started making more of his foul shots. So basically looking from like mid-November until the time his body crumped this last year, he was at 20, 10, and 5.5 with 1.6 steals, 1.2 blocks, 55-79 splits. Jalen Johnson has legitimate first-round appeal if he can actually stay remotely healthy. And it is a concern because his rookie year, he played just 22 ball games. Some of that was just, not having the opportunity. Second season in the NBA, he played 15 minutes a game, but he wasn't a full-time starter. Since he's moved into that full-timer role, he missed 26 and 46 games each of the last 2 years. That's a rough count. He's barely getting to halfway. A little bit more than halfway. Still, like, So it's another one where, and this one, the discussion point is very different than Dyson Daniels because Jalen Johnson has all of the makings of a guy that should be going in the second round. He's good. He was good at points. He was good at rebounds. He was good at assists for a forward. He was great at steals for a forward. Good at blocks, good at field goal percent. He gave you enough threes where it wasn't a big negative. Free throw percent was like decent enough. This is a guy who was good at a lot of stuff. His value was not tied up in one statistical category where if you turn that category off, he drops 100 rank slots. Jalen Johnson's best category this last year was rebounds at 10. If you punted those, he was still, we're looking at that in that range when he was making his free throws, I guess. He was still a second rounder, even if you turned off his best category this last year. In that like mid-November to when he got hurt range. If you go full season, he drops from 20-something to 40-something. That's the difference there, taking rebounds away. Second best category fluctuated between steals and field goal percent, depending on the week. But this was a dude who, he was a dude. 2010 and 5 is a crazy set of numbers to put across the board. And a 1-1-1, the Danny Green special, a 3, a steal, a block, or more. It's hard not to love Jalen Johnson. His fantasy game is insane. I can't possibly tell you right now whether he's going to last an entire year. But I also don't think that he could possibly fall farther than the third round, not with the fact that he could legitimately be a first rounder this year. When you think about how bad the depth is for top-level guys with so many dudes out, like look at the top of the board from last year. Halliburton, the number 5 guy, gone. Damian Lillard, the number 8 guy, gone. Kyrie Irving, the number 12 guy, gone. Jason Tatum, the number 13 guy, gone. Jalen Johnson was number 21 before he got hurt last year. Move those 4 guys out of the way, he jumps up to number 17 without doing anything differently. And we already told you that after he started making free throws, he was number 8 with all these guys still around. I got to see where he's going. Like, this is one of those ones where I got to see where he's going. If he's getting drafted inside the top 20, that would be a hard pill for me to swallow when he hasn't shown the ability to stay healthy all year. If this is a guy that you can get near 30, you kind of have to, even with the injury stuff. Because he's on a team that we just talked about. We know is going to be playing to win. And he's insanely good. Kristaps Porzingis, one of the 2 big acquisitions for the Hawks this offseason. Nickeil Alexander-Walker being, I guess, what you call the other one, although Porzingis is certainly the big one, both in stature and in impact. Again, when he's healthy, the Hawks are going to be relying on a couple of guys to actually stay upright that don't exactly have a history of doing so. Porzingis, I mean, look at the games played marker on him. It's been bad right from the outset, really. He's had, I would argue, no fully healthy seasons in his NBA career. First season, he missed 10 games, but he's only playing 28 minutes a night. But did that matter this past season? Not really. Missed 10, missed 16, missed 34, missed 20. No, only 15. That was a COVID year. Missed 29, missed basically 50. No, that's not true. That was a trade year. He missed 30. Then he missed 17, 25, and 40 this past year. Although in this one, he came into the season hurt. We knew he wasn't going to play. I thought he wasn't going to play for the first 2 months. He didn't play for about the first 1 month. But then, again, missed like an additional 25 games the rest of the season, even after he came back, because that's the Porzingis way. I don't think that Porzingis is a guy that you should draft in head-to-head leagues. I like the number of missed games, the fact that it's rest days regularly. Like, odds are he's not going to be playing back-to-back for the Hawks, but maybe he's going to be like, I can do it, I promise. And then they'll do it, and then he'll get himself hurt some other way. Maybe a possibility, I guess. I don't know that that's necessarily something you want, especially because that probably means he's hurt by the time your head-to-head playoffs come around. Yeah, I mean, if he's a guy that you could get like outside the top 50 in head-to-head, you'd have to consider it. But I think it's probably easier just to say no to Porzingis on the head-to-head side because of the health stuff. As we talked about it before, like if there aren't that many guys in the NBA that you can just say there is almost no chance this guy makes it through a season healthy. For a while, it was Danilo Gallinari. Porzingis is probably that guy now, where you're looking at it, you're like, all right, best case scenario, this guy misses like 17 ball games. That's a lot. That's a lot of games. Now, he obviously has the per game appeal, which is why you say, oh, take a chance on this, because Porzingis is pretty regularly a second rounder on the per game side with good scoring, okay rebounding. He blocks shots, he hits threes, he has both percentages that are great. He fits the bill of really the old man squad type of fantasy line, but I can't have a guy missing half the season. The one advantage this year is he comes into the season healthy, so at least you don't start like down 20 ball games right out of the chute, where this past year was like, look, even if he played in every game after he comes back, he's still only getting to like 62. This year, like 82 is the starting point. It's not going to happen, but at least it's not wiped out by an injury before the season even begins. So at least there's that. But again, you got to look at how the totals, I know everybody hates totals, but you got to look at how the totals make sense here. Porzingis missed half the season this last year. He was number 115 by totals, which frankly is pretty good considering he played only half the year. But now you got to kind of weigh it out. And I actually think that looking season over season with Porzingis, yeah, if you can believe it, I'm still coughing from that crap I had before I left. The year before this, when he missed 25 ball games, as, again, what was his per game rank? He was number 14 that year, so it was a particularly good year for Porzingis on the per game side. He was still number 40 by totals, which, again, I don't think you can just look at it and say, well, head-to-head, that means it makes sense, because it's going to be when those games get missed. Roto, that year, if you drafted him outside the top 40, his totals mark really kind of indicates you got your money's worth on Porzingis. This is not this past year, but the prior one. Again, when he missed 25 ball games instead of 40. And that's a discussion point on Porzingis. I don't think it's worth it in head-to-head. I do think it's worth it in, and maybe I should say, I don't think it's worth it in unlimited games leagues. I do think he's worth it in a lot of games cap formats where if you can get him in the 5th round, which feels kind of conceivable given he's kind of an afterthought now, despite the fact that his per game numbers are so good. If you can get him, like, say, pick 50, 55, you got a pretty good shot of getting to that mark by totals. And then with games cap, you just fill in the ones he misses with somebody else. Perhaps his backup. And that's the sad part of all of this stuff on Atlanta is Onyeka Okongwu. And listen, I don't doubt the fact that Okongwu and Porzingis will probably play alongside one another, but the final starting spot for the Hawks, at least as it appears right now, because Trae Young is going to start, Dyson Daniels is going to start, Jalen Johnson is going to start, Kristaps Porzingis is going to start. The four guys we've talked about are locked into starting roles with the Hawks. The last starting spot would seemingly be between Onyeka Okongwu and Zachary Risachet. And from just a straight team build standpoint, it kind of feels like it has to be Risachet. He's the prize rookie. He's the first pick from last year. He's a scoring type where Okongwu is a more traditional big man. Playing Okongwu pushes Jalen Johnson down to the 3, which he can certainly handle, but he makes more sense at the 4. Putting Risachet in there, he gets to play his natural position at small forward. Everybody does, basically, at that point. Jalen Johnson is your starting power forward. Kristaps Porzingis is your starting center. As I just said already, I do think there will be plenty of times where Porzingis and Okongwu share the floor. It's going to, as guys move on and off the floor, Jalen Johnson's getting his rest. Okongwu, he's the power forward, and so on and so forth. So, no, I don't think this is the kind of thing that's going to completely ruin Okongwu, but at the same time, this was a player that was having his moment at the end of last year. Really, once Clint Capella was retired for the Hawks, Okongwu went crazy. Last 2 months of the season, he played 32 minutes a game. He was a third rounder. 16 and 11 with a steal, a block, and a 3 on 56-81 splits. He was incredible. Yeah, there was no Jalen Johnson during that stretch either. But, I mean, Okongwu's value mostly was tied to whether or not Clint Capella was actually in basketball games. And over that stretch, he largely was not. And Capella was gone, and the world rejoiced. And then Porzingis came in, and the world sobbed quietly. Played the smallest violin we could find. Okongwu will probably go back to something like what he was before, which was Capella's backup, who was, in that case, probably better than Capella, and got his, 24, 25 minutes or whatever it was. I mean, we can look at this up. Here, he was at 28 minutes a game this year, 25 and a half last year. But you got to try to figure out where they come from. How many minutes per game do you think Porzingis plays? I don't think they want him playing 32 a game. That's enough to destroy his legs. Let's say Porzingis plays 29, like this last year, which feels pretty reachable. That leaves 19 backup center minutes for Okongwu, and they will, when he's healthy, basically all go to him. They got Mo Gay on the team as well. This is the backup centers are not going to push Okongwu. Any other backup centers floating around? No, the rest of them are basically all gone. So his starting point feels like around 19. Good games, it pushes a little higher. If he and Porzingis share the floor for 2 to 3 minutes per half, that gets Okongwu back up to around 25 minutes per game, which, as we've talked about before, if the blocks are there, and this has been sort of a weird thing with him, where they were and then they weren't, and then the steals came up this year, if the defensive stats are more like 1.8 to 2, 25 minutes a game would actually still be enough for Okongwu to have some fantasy value. Not a ton, but some. And you can look at last year and say, oh, he was number 116. No, what was the final number? He was higher than that. 108 the prior year at 25 minutes. Mind you, that was sort of without steals, and was a 61-79 splits that year. Yeah, I mean, those are pretty good. So are we saying top 100 is the target for Okongwu? Those extra 6-7 minutes, man, they really went a long way. Now, the other bit of news to sort of keep in mind is we just talked about Porzingis is probably going to miss 20 ball games this year, give or take another 20. those are going to be starts for Okongwu. So if you say the floor is 24, 25 minutes in top 100, and there are 25 games built in now where he's more like a top 30 fantasy play, that then averages out. So call it, 50 games where he's top 100, call it 25 games where he's top 30. He falls more in that probably 70-ish, 70 to 90 range, something like that overall. But you're going to have to wait it out. You're going to have to be okay with the fact that there are going to be a lot of sort of quiet games mixed in with the better ones. Are you okay with waiting on it? Are you okay with getting your big games intermittently? Maybe. Maybe. Like, I think you could take him around pick 100 and he probably beats that, both by totals and on a per game side. But I don't think it's going to be the way you want it to. Like, he's not going to just coast at a top 40 clip all year. It's going to be like 100, top 100, top 100, top 100, top 30, top 100, top 100, top 30 kind of thing. And you're probably going to just want to close your eyes and say, well, at least I know this guy's going to be like 80 range when all is said and done. And if he's healthy, great. Probably makes more sense. Well, I mean, Roto side, you could plug and play him if you wanted to, but probably someone that still deserves to be started every night, but just not with the upside that we were hoping for. And finally, here's Zachary Reese-Shea, and I'm not talking about Nickeil Alexander-Walker because I think he's kind of like the alternate Zachary Reese-Shea. He's going to play a ton of minutes off the bench, but his fantasy game is not all that robust. And the only reason I'm talking about Reese-Shea, even though his fantasy game is not particularly robust, is that, he was a former 1 year ago number 1 overall pick, and we're waiting to see what comes around for him, if anything. I don't think there's nearly enough usage for him to get on anybody's radar on the 9-cat side. He was ranked 250th this past year with bad free throw, poor field goal, not that many defensive stats, not that many threes, not that many rebounds or assists. Like, there are a lot of hurdles to overcome on a Hawks team that has other options at small forward. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, we just talked about. You could see them go small and play more Kobe Buffkin, who's looked pretty good in limited action. They brought in Luke Kennard to space the floor if the Reese-Shea thing is not going all that well. So they have other options there. Reese-Shea is going to get the first crack at it almost without question, just because of where he was drafted and what they're hoping he becomes. But he's a guy that needs to fix 3 at least fantasy things for him to get to a point that's even considered fantasy draftable. Like, he needs to, I don't care what the 3 things are. He needs to either start rebounding, score more, pass more, steal more, hit more shots or free throws, or like some combination of 2 to 3 of those categories. Otherwise, you're going to see a fantasy season that isn't all that different from what happened this past year. So 5 deep, I think, is the answer for the Hawks. Okongwu, I don't know where he's going to get drafted. I don't know how high people are on him after the Porzingis trade. I think he's still going to be 9-cat startable when all is aggregated at the end of the year. Porzingis is probably a games cap type dude. Again, I don't think that he's worth the plunge in head-to-head. Games cap, you're probably looking at Porzingis somewhere in the range of, what did I say before? Like, top 50 to 60, somewhere in that neck of the woods. Jalen Johnson, to me, like, there's no way you can let him fall farther than the 3rd round, even with the injury stuff. Dyson Daniels, not someone that I'm targeting in fantasy. I think he's probably someone that gets overdrafted. But again, we'll see where these guys' first pre-rank is, which could be any day now. Like, Blink and Yahoo leagues might be open. They may have opened while we're doing this podcast. And then Trae Young, head-to-head punt build only. Like, he's not going to fall far enough in a Roto league where you'd actually want to take him. So head-to-head, that's your ticket. Did leagues open while we were talking? No, I don't think they did. But literally, it could be at any moment. Any moment. We were told first 2 weeks probably of August. We are in those now. Like, rate, subscribe. Please do. Again, like and subscribe on your way out. That's a big one for those of you watching us on YouTube. Subscribe on Apple or Spotify. Hey, I haven't bugged you guys in a long time. If there's anybody newish out there, please take a second to find the 5-star button on Apple or Spotify. Those do actually go a long way. and I'll start pushing you towards that here especially when leagues open and people start paying closer attention again. I'm Dan. I'll see you guys. Maybe we'll do a show over the weekend since we missed the last 4. I don't know. Only way to know is to subscribe. There's a moth flying back and forth in my periphery. Get out of here.